Okay. Hey, friends. This is Dan Burke. Dan and Stephanie Burke. You're watching Behind the Scenes Divine Intimacy Radio, and we do the 5-minute ramp up to get as many of you live as we can interacting with us. And if you could, do me a huge favor and share this. Share it on Facebook. Share it, if you're watching YouTube, however you're watching it. Share. It helps us to overcome the bias against faithful Catholic content that's pretty constant out there, and the bias against the truth in our culture. And people need to hear the truth. And today we're going to be talking about discernment of spirits in marriage. So before we jump in, though, we have a few seats left in the pilgrimage to Israel. Mm-hmm. So Stephanie and I are leading a pilgrimage in March to Israel, and it's going to be
March of 2021.
It'll be an unforgettable experience, and you will never in your life shake what happens to you, what you'll experience in Israel. I can promise you that. And I know that I've been there, of course, but also because our pilgrimages are so deeply rooted in prayer and so deeply committed to the ancient tradition of how a pilgrimage works. I've actually, as a surprise, I'll tell you, but I won't tell the others. I guess they'll find out maybe. But I wrote a book just for each of the pilgrims that nobody gets but the pilgrims. Mm-hmm. So I think it'll be pretty powerful for them. So that'll be in March, and then the next thing is, you want to tell them about the marriage retreat?
Sure, we have a marriage retreat coming up in Hanceville at the Shrine of the Blessed Sacrament, an amazing place in and of itself.
Yeah. And
so you can come and have a mini pilgrimage, a marriage retreat with your spouse there and over the Valentine's Day weekend
of 2021.
So the place to find all this information, as well as everywhere that we go, all of our events, where we'll be, different online options and all that, is at SpiritualDirection.com. The events tab will give you where we'll be and how to sign up, and then all kinds of rich content there as well.
Cool. All right. Yeah, like I said, share this out. I think we're good to go. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, and your market set, go. This is Dan and Stephanie Burke with Divine Intimacy Radio, your radio haven of rest.
Your hermitage of the heart.
Your monastery of the mind, where we lift our hearts and minds to heaven, to draw on the wisdom of the saints to help us, to draw near to God, and to be a light in the culture. So as we are changed and transformed as we draw near to Jesus, we are changed, and then we change the world around us, and the world needs you. I'm telling you this. This is unqualified. I don't care who you are. If you know Him, the world needs you.
The world needs who you will become when you are fully
alive in Jesus,
alive in Christ.
I agree with you.
And someone's waiting on you.
Right. Ooh, say that.
Someone
that's a big
is
deal.
Waiting on you. So don't lose this opportunity, because...
What does that mean, though? There's a lot behind that.
Oh, it's huge, because the Lord, He purifies us. He sets us on fire. He perfects us. He brings us into virtues that we don't even know we have, or that we have the possibility to exercise in. There are charisms that'll start to work. I mean, there's all kinds of your giftedness, your uniqueness. You have a mission and a purpose in the world through God's eyes, first and foremost, to have a relationship with Him, and then to live fully who you are called to be out in the world, so that you can set the world on fire.
And so, you know what I like, the word that's coming to mind? Unleashed. Do you like that word?
I don't know.
You don't like that? I like that. Unleashed.
I wasn't on a leash beforehand.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Okay, forget it then. So we're talking about setting the captives free. I mean, We're on episode 11 of 14 with Father Timothy Gallagher of the Oblates of Mary and Oblates of the Virgin Mary religious community. And Father Gallagher, if you don't know him, I'd be surprised, but he has been the most prolific writer, and I think among the best in our time at bringing the wisdom of St. Ignatius to the masses, to the world, in a way that's really powerful and helpful. And his latest book is what we're talking about today, Discernment of Spirits in Marriage, Ignatian Wisdom for husband and wives. And what's so powerful about the book is he uses an amalgam of two characters, of people wrapped up in two characters, Mark and Anne. We walk through the rules before they got married, and then while they're married, and the struggles that they have, and how the rules are playing out in their journal. It's really cool the way he wrote this, and I've said it's his best book. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. It's been the most enjoyable because his books are all A level work. I mean, exceptional.
It's also the most accessible
because
because of the way it's written.
Yeah. So Father Gallagher, we're in chapter 11, Finding Our Balance, the 11th rule of St. Ignatius. Could you set us up with Mark and Anne?
Sure. So at this point, 3 months have passed since that grace-filled plane ride that we mentioned in our last conversation. And they've been very busy weeks recently for Mark and Anne. And this Saturday morning, they've been able to get away for a few hours, and they're out walking in the park together, just enjoying the good weather and a chance just to be together and chat. Anne's mom is taking care of the children. And as they walk, Anne just remarks to Mark, "You seem a little more tired these days." And Mark kind of smiles a little bit. "You don't miss much." And you're right, actually. And Anne says, "Well, I noticed you've been getting up a little earlier than usual recently." And Mark says, "Yeah, in fact, that 10-minute time of prayer in the morning has proven so fruitful that he finds that he wants more time so that he doesn't have to cut short the prayer. So he's been rising earlier for that." And Anne asks him, "Well, how long do you spend in prayer?" And Mark says, "I haven't really timed it, maybe 20 minutes. Some days it might go a little longer than that." The conversation continues, and at a certain point, Anne mentions, "You had told me that Father asked if he'd be part of the team that prepares the Tuesday morning men's breakfast. And how's that going?" And Mark says, "Yeah, it's going really well. I really enjoy doing it." "What have they asked you to do?" "Well, they've asked me to contact the speakers and make those arrangements." So Mark's been choosing the speakers, contacting them, making the arrangements. And he tells Anne that he's really enjoying doing it because he's learning a lot. The men have been very pleased with the speakers, and he enjoys his one-on-one conversation with them, these various speakers, as they come. Well, the conversation continues. You can probably get the point at this, where this is going at this point. But Anne tells Mark that there's been a change in her schedule in her special ed teaching, which is going to make it easier for her to get to Mass during the week. Then she asks Mark, "You had talked about getting to Mass on your lunch hour, and is that working out?" Mark says, yeah, it's working actually quite well. I really like that because it allows me to get to Mass more often during the week than before, and I can feel the difference in my day. It does mean a kind of a rushed lunch hour, he tells her, because he's got to get over to the church and back, and sometimes Mass may go a little bit longer. Maybe that's where we priests get a little verbose sometimes. But she asks Mark, "What about lunch?" Well, he admits that has to be kind of rushed at times. Finally, Anne just stops, and she faces Mark, and she says, are you doing anything else spiritually these days?" And Mark says, "Well, yeah, one of the speakers mentioned Francis de Sales' Introduction to the Devout Life, and I've started reading it. It's the best thing I found on living holiness in the lay vocation." And he goes on to say, in fact, it's giving me some ideas about things you and I might do spiritually and things we could do as a family. And I had wanted to talk to you about these. Well, at this point, Anne said, they pass by a park bench, and Anne says, "Why don't we sit here for a moment, and then I'll just read what she says to Mark. Mark, you know how happy I am about what's happening spiritually for you, and I love what it's doing for our marriage and our family. This is all of this is good. I know that you felt spiritually alive these past few months, and everything you've told me is good. But I wonder how long you can keep all of this up. You get less sleep, your lunch is rushed, you're busier, you've gotten more tired. Choosing the speaker takes time, and we know how packed things are at work. Now you're thinking of adding even more. All of it's good, but what about you? What's going to happen if you get too worn?" And this kind of stops Mark in his tracks. And he tells Anne, until you put it together like that, I just didn't even see this whole picture. And it really is something that I'll need to look at. And then Anne draws the conclusion here. I wonder if this isn't another aspect of the spiritual experience we've been talking about. We've said a lot about not giving in to desolation and the sense of helplessness that it wants to instill. In fact, all of our conversations thus far have been about that. But maybe there's also something to be said about times of consolation, that we not stretch too far in times of energy and wind up getting hurt spiritually in another way. And Mark agrees with her that this really is something we need to look at. So that's actually the point of Ignatius's Rule 11, not to get discouraged and helpless and passive and regressing in time of desolation, but neither to push too hard in time of consolation in a way that can wind up, setting us up for some kind of a crash or a fall in some way in the spiritual life. So humble in consolation, trusting in desolation. And that's the portrait of the mature person of discernment. So we'll throw it open at this point.
I love that. We do half-day retreats around the country. And when we do the one on mental prayer, at the end of the retreat, we always ask people to make a commitment to what the Lord puts on their heart to either begin or deepen or, some positive change to their mental prayer. And I always tell them, on the stage or wherever I am that's usually elevated, I show them, I stretch my feet out as far as I can, left foot in front of the right foot, to where I'm almost off balance. And I say, this is the devil's plan for you, is just get you to overcommit in this moment of consolation, and then to knock you down, because it's going to be easy because you can't hold your balance when you're that stretched out, and then to tell you what an idiot you were for even trying in the first place. So I said, what we want to do is we want to take baby steps when we're in consolation. And what I want you to do is take just a step where you can step out firmly ahead of where you are. And then I want you to, minimum for 30 days or until you can repeat that habit about 90%, before you add anything new, pour concrete on that step, praise the Lord, and then take the next step.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice image for Ignatius's point here. In a way, what he's doing is tying together everything that he said, and consequently that we've said thus far in these rules, and that he just puts it all together. As I said, don't push too hard, too quickly, too much in time of consolation. The Latin proverb, make haste slowly, is coming in mind to my mind as we say this. There's a wisdom in that. And then on the other hand, don't give in to desolation. And if we can do those two things, we remain humble when we're in consolation, we don't push too hard, and we don't give in to discouragement and desolation. That's really how we go forward solidly in the spiritual life. That's a great image, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that comes to mind is you talk about the consolation and desolation, and it may have been at one of your workshops, Father, that I saw this, either that or we ended up drawing it. I don't know where this came from, but I think of the consolation and desolation kind of like a radio wave.
Oh yeah, that's
sound wave, workshop, right?
Yeah.
So it's up and down and up and down, that we're not in constant ebb and flow, but we're moving from one to the other. And that at that peak, when it's in consolation, that remaining humble also keeps us from thinking that we are the creators of any of this goodness, of this energy, of this beautiful growth that's happening. So it keeps us humble. The Lord is the creator of all good. And so we can stay humble in that and strive and move forward in that and revel in it and receive it. And then down in desolation, like you said, to be trusting so that we don't despair, like we don't give up and then think that it's never going to end. So that visual for me has been very powerful for me because I'm a visual person, so that's helpful.
So when we get back from the break, Father, maybe you can comment a little bit more about that ebb and flow and that summary that really came from one of your seminars that you gave at the Marian Servants of Divine Providence is where I think I saw it. So we'll be right back. You remember that, Father? I'm sure you do.
Was it a seminar on the first week rules?
Yeah, and it was at the Cenacle down in Clearwater,
Sure.
Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's EWTN filmed that, I think, is where I saw it on EWTN video.
Yeah, we did it down there. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes me want to remember Ron Novotny and
Did you know Ron?
I did. Mm-hmm. We worked to collaborate with them and try to, support them any way we could. And so, yeah, we went to his funeral and.
What a wonderful man he was.
Oh yeah, he
loved him.
So God rest his soul, and we'll head back in here to the ebb and flow. On your mark, get set, go. Welcome back. This is Dan and Stephanie Burke with Divine Intimacy Radio, your radio haven of rest, talking through the really extraordinary book published by Sophia Institute Press, by the way, Discernment of Spirits in Marriage, Ignatian Wisdom for Husbands and Wives, written by Father Timothy Gallagher, O.M.V., and you can find the book out at SpiritualDirection.com. And Sophia's published a few of Father Gallagher's books, I think, and Sophia's an amazing publisher, and you can trust their work. They're totally faithful to the magisterium. The entire staff loves the Lord and the church, and I know that from personal experience with them, visiting them and being involved with them. So it's really a beautiful organization. So Discernment of Spirits in Marriage, SpiritualDirection.com is where you can find it. You can also find faithful books always at EWTN's Religious Catalog. Father Gallagher, before the break, Stephanie reflected on an illustration you've given at, so you're speaking on the first rules and that ebb and flow of trust or humility, and then trust and humility. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, we've been speaking primarily thus far in the rules about not giving into spiritual desolation, being aware of it, understanding it, and then using the tools that keep increasing as we go through these rules to reject it. And probably that's the more frequent issue that most of us deal with. But this other issue of a time of consolation, maybe days, weeks of the Lord's closeness and energy, just like Mark's experience at this point. He loves the growth that's happening. The goodness is spreading to his marriage, his family, his work, everything in his life. And there's something actually wonderful about the desire for more. 10 minutes was good, but 20 minutes would be better. Mm-hmm. Getting to Mass 2 or 3 times a week in the morning was good, but getting to Mass every day at lunch hour is better, and so forth. To the point where we can start pushing things too hard. And this is real. I think anybody dedicated to the Lord finds this at times. Here's another wonderful opportunity that someone presents me with, or here's another spiritual practice that I read about, or that someone recommended in a talk on YouTube or whatever. And something in us warms to that, which is wonderful. But Ignatius says here in Rule 11, just stay humble in time of consolation. Don't push too far. And Ignatius, who is always practical, never gives just generic advice. He doesn't just say, well, try to be humble. But he gives in the short text of this rule a very concrete way of doing it. What he says is, when you are in spiritual consolation and you're thinking of adding this and adding that and adding this, just remember what it's like when you're in desolation, and just remember how little you feel able to do when you're in desolation. And that will help you to keep things balanced when you're in consolation. So it's a rich profile, because if we do push too hard, even with good things, we can't keep it up. And at some point, the danger there, which of course is the enemy's tactic if we give into it, but we don't have to. But the enemy's tactic is to lead us to the point where we say, well, all this energy I'm expending, and I'm tired, and I can't go on like this. And the danger is that we could throw in a towel on a lot of things. So humility is the way to go, and we go forward solidly.
You know, Father, what comes to mind as you talk about this is, especially I think as folks start to learn the discerning life, to have genuine reversions or conversions to the faith. They're really having an encounter with the Lord, and they're starting to grow. And certainly Mark is talking about this, but I even see it as in people who have been walking with the Lord and having tremendous growth and consolation in their spiritual walk. What I often see is that, what I've counseled before, when they're asking, well, what about this? What about this? I want to do this. I mean, I remember even exuberantly telling my spiritual director in my second year of spiritual direction and right after my reversion that I wanted to start a Catholic school. I was so excited. I wanted to do that. Now, eventually I was called to Catholic education. That's certainly what we do now, but that was like this exuberance that happened that he just told me to kind of slow down. But when we are really walking quite fast with the Lord, sometimes what happens is the enemy can't necessarily convince us to go rob a bank or, do something terrible out there. He's lost some of his ability to tempt us to really terrible things. So what he does is he starts to tempt us with a lot of good things. And it's another project. It's another position at the parish. It is starting a new apostolate. It's a new thing, constant.
And then they're giving up prayer.
And then they become so active that then they lose their prayer, their peace, their walk with the Lord. And as you said, they're exhausted and they may even burn out. They may have a terrible fall, which it turns out to be terribly scandalous or whatever because they've given up prayer. And they've lost that discerning heart, that discerning walk with the Lord. Do you want to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think the safeguard against all of that is exactly what Ignatius says in this rule. And so he says literally, let the one who is in consolation strive to humble himself as much as he can, and thinking of how little he is capable in time of desolation. But that's energetic language. Strive to humble himself and humble and lower himself as much as he can. So humility, when we really understand it in its rich, authentic sense, and as I say, in the biblical sense, think of Jesus, who is humble of heart, and Mary, who is aware of her low estate and rejoices in what the Lord is doing in her. We love humble people when we meet them. They're going to be warm. I mean, genuinely humble people. There's a warmth about them. There's a readiness to help. There's an openness to listen. There's no sense of arrogance or self-sufficiency or I'm the one that knows everything. And if we can be in that space in the spiritual life, then for Ignatius, that's the space which facilitates every other growth. As he says in his meditation on the two standards, from there, all the other growth comes. So his plea, as it were, in Rule 11 is, when growth is happening, bless God for it, thank God for it, open your heart to it, but remain in that humble space. And then, Stephanie, all the dangers that you mentioned, they'll never harm us, because of the humble spirit will see us safely through all of them.
Yeah, good stuff. I think one thing I want maybe you can comment on, I remember a passage, I think it's in the interior castle of St. Teresa of Avila. And she basically, or it might have been in her life, I can't remember, but she basically says, look, if the journey's tough and you want to get to God, she used the illustration, if you're traveling across difficult terrain and it's not comfortable, why would you take more time than you need and suffer in that context? Why not run harder and faster? So, and basically she's exhorting her reader to a real aggressive approach to the spiritual life. How does that balance with this rule?
Well, desire is the heart of everything in the spiritual life, and the desire is itself a grace, that we feel that. And so please God, we do have desires, and great desires. Jean-Pierre de Caussade says, let your heart desire the infinite. Mm-hmm. What do you want? Those of you seeking perfection, which today we'd say those of you seeking holiness, let your heart give free rein to your desires. Let your heart desire the infinite. So I think probably that's where St. Teresa is going with this. So there's no diminishing of the, love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. It's a totalizing thing. But like everything in the spiritual life, if we want to put it in theological terms, in the way St. Thomas Aquinas spoke about it, prudence has to be the virtue which governs all the steps that we take for them to be really virtuous and really lead us toward God. And that's not prudence in the sense of a kind of smallness of heart, but it's prudence in the authentic sense of that. We choose the wisest means to the end. The end is to grow in love of God in a totalizing way as much as is possible in the human condition. But prudence will show us the wise steps. I think Rule 11, actually, at least the first half of it especially, could be called a very rich illustration of prudence. Be wise in the steps that you take toward it. Yeah, that's how we go forward,
I think the other thing about her admonition is, what is she admonishing people to? Prayer, self-giving, self-denial, and not necessarily, and she's speaking to the interior life primarily, and drawing near to Jesus in prayer. So in some of this illustration we've been talking about is this temptation to do too much externally, right? Certainly you can try to, you can stretch too far and try to, when you should be praying 10 minutes because you've never prayed before, and try to pray an hour. But I think her admonishment is related to, give yourself over to this. And then, of course, all of the saints would admonish us to prudence and that virtue, which then helps us to moderate how it is that we carry out those desires.
And in all things, humility.
Yep.
Yeah, it's one of the beautiful things about our Catholic spiritual tradition is that it has all the energy, but all the wisdom of the ages too. Mm-hmm. It's a solid, sure, safe, but energetic path toward holiness. It's a solid way to go forward. And I think that becomes apparent as we cite these various saints.
Yeah, I agree. Well, this is Dan and Stephanie Burke. We're with Father Timothy Gallagher, and we've been working our way through this very powerful series. It's been powerful for us, digging into his new book, Discernment of Spirits in Marriage. And you can find that at SpiritualDirection.com. Father, I think as we conclude the show, we've got a minute and a half or so. I think that what strikes me as we're talking today is just that self-awareness, Teresa of Avila says, is the beginning of the interior. It's part of that beginning stages. St. Catherine of Siena says it the same way, right out of the gate in the dialogues. St. Ignatius really gives us a guide to the best kind of self-awareness. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, he does what he does with everything, and that is he takes a generic wise counsel and he says, here are some concrete practical ways that you can actually do it. And he does this with prayer, with discernment, with all of these things we're speaking about. I think anyone who goes through these rules is going to be well, and tries to put them in practice, is going to be well on the road toward that kind of awareness.
Fantastic. And as we're finishing up too, if you could just remind folks where they can find more about you. We're not done with the series yet, but we want people to learn more about your work.
Probably my website would be the easiest place. That's just FR for Father, frtimothygallagher.org. Everything's there.
frtimothygallagher.org. And you just cannot go wrong with his work. He inspired my recent book and one of my best-selling books, Spiritual Warfare and the Discernment of Spirits, which is on a similar topic, but this book is about how it applies in marriage. You can, of course, use both to help you on this journey, and then dig deeper in his other works, which are just fantastic.
So with that, our time's up. So until next time, may the God of peace make you perfect in holiness. May he preserve you soul. May he preserve you whole and entire, spirit, soul, and body, irreproachable at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Marcus, does she need to say that entire thing over, or can you?
If you want to, sure. Okay. So until next time, may the God of peace make you perfect, and I can't see that. It needs to be... Father, I'm a little blind. Okay. Until next time, may the God of peace make you perfect in holiness. May he preserve you whole and entire, spirit, soul, and body, irreproachable at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.